Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to go over some of the tuning for the manual swap in the 1994 Corvette. First thing I do want to discuss is a lot of people when they're doing these manual swaps, or the people that do them, traditionally just swap the ECMs. You can do. I have a donor car. I have a manual ECM out of a 94 sitting on my workbench that I could plug in and should be ready to go. However, the current ECM that I have in my car with the auto transmission, I have a lot of other custom tuning stuff done to it. Some to increase a little bit of power, other things to delete, let's say like an EGR, VATs, air pump, setting different parameters for when fans turn on and off. Stuff that I put a lot of time and effort into that I don't want to have to transfer over to the manual ECM. For me, it's going to be about the same amount of work either way. So what I'm going to do, what I'm going to cover today, is actually going into the automatic tune and adjusting it for the manual transmission parameters, which is actually fairly easy. There's a handful of tools that you're going to need that are free to download off the internet. These work for 94 and 95 LT1 cars, not just Corvette, but F-body, B-body, Y-body stuff as well. The first thing you're going to need is EEHack. So this tool is what you can actually use to pull the tune out of your car and flash a new one on it. So it either basically copies or writes. And this is, we will use later. I'll go through a video, or on the video later on, actually flash in the car. I already have my factory tune pulled out. The other tool that we won't need to use, but you should always download and have, is called EEHack. This allows you to data log the car, so basically keeps track of everything that's going on. But what we're going to be doing here to start with is called Tunner Pro. So Tunner Pro, this is another free one. You can buy it, makes it a little bit faster, but the free is perfectly fine for anything that I do. Inside, you'll see I already have what's called a bin file loaded. Your bin file is your actual tune. So you're going to hear me call bin a lot. That's B-I-N. So this tune that I have is already had all the adjustments and I'm ready to flash, but I'm going to kind of show you how I did all of that. There are really three major parameters. You've got scalars, flags, and tables. Scalars hold things like cylinder volume, injector flow rate, min RPM, max RPM for EGR stuff, speedometer settings. These will be your fan turn on and off. One thing you can see in these is when you hover over them, it gives you kind of a short description of what each one of these parameters does, which is awesome, especially for free software that basically the LT1 community has built over the years. But one thing, how I'm going to show you how I did this, is over here in the right hand side, there's what's called a difference tool. So it lets you load some compare bins or compare tunes from other vehicles or other ECMs. And what I did is I pulled a factory manual tune from a 94 car. There's a repository online to where people have shared and uploaded basically their tunes that they pulled from their vehicles. So I pulled basically the latest version of the 94 manual tune. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my factory tune that I pulled from this car back in 2019. I'm going to only search for items that are defined and hit the search button. And what this is going to do is it's going to pull me up every single parameter that's different between the two. So all these are pulled up now. You can see there is 2,193 bytes that are different. And while that sounds like a lot, and it is, a lot of these are just individual items. So kind of start going through this list, and I'll tell you what I did and what we need to work on and whatnot. So Calibration ID. This is just a user number that keeps track of what the cal number is. So every time I write a new cal, I change the number. This is just an easy way for me to know which tune is in the car. Doesn't affect anything other than it's just a point that I can go into the tune and see which version it is for me. Prom ID, again, not as important for any of this stuff. It is slightly different, but going to leave it. Automatic checks transmission 4L60E enable. So this is a very important parameter that has to be done. So over here you can see that in the tune from the 94 manual, it's not set, and in the factory tune from my auto, it is set. What this does is this turns on all of the automatic transmission items. So simply turning that off pretty much fixes the tune. However, I'm going to go through, there's a lot of other things that I adjusted to help out. Skip shift. So again, we are looking at a flag. I undid skip shift. That way it doesn't throw a code because I don't have it hooked up and I don't want that to be active. So I have it not set. Brake switch open, diagnostic error, trans system voltage, traction control, force motor, no VSS. A lot of this stuff you can see it says not set and set. These are all error codes from auto to manual differences. So I basically went into each of these parameters and unclicked them so that I wouldn't get a code for them. Shift light diagnostics is set in the manual and not in the auto, so we changed that. TCC, which is your torque converter stuff, again, don't have it in manual, so not set. Vehicle speed sensor diagnostics. This stuff is actually in the scalar section. You can see it's different. Open it up to kind of show you between, I got it the same right here. It's basically the RPM that it engages. I have this set differently because of the high stall torque converter I had in there. Nothing's going to affect that, so I'm going to leave that how it is. EGR enabled. For this tune, I have it set to 0, I believe. Nope, I have it set high because I'm not using EGR. Fan enabled for coolant temp. I have these adjusted for how I want them to be. So I have them turn it on sooner so that the car stays cooler. Skip shift enable. All of these I have set to where they won't turn on now. So let's talk about max RPM for skip shift. If you look, I have it set to 0. So that means it's basically off at all times and we'll never try to do the skip shift. So these are all parameters that basically you can set to 0, and they'll tell you in this tree, disable if automatic transmit enabled, skip shift will only function below this RPM. So if I set it to 0, it can't function below that RPM because it'll never be below 0. Oh, went too far, sorry. Let's get back. O2 swing voltage, not going to mess with that. Stock F body, it's not an F body. O2 airflow reference table, BLM, idle speed targets. So you can see these are going to be in tables. Pull this open so you can see in gear and neutral. The difference, I believe, in this, the idle speed is manual cars only use in gear. So they're basically registering up every single one of these as being off or wrong or different because the manual doesn't have a neutral setting and the auto does. So again, this parameter doesn't matter for me. If someone wanted to, they could copy it over, but because I have that auto bit turned off, it's not going to make a difference for this. So that manual is not going to be looking for those neutral things anyway, so it's no big deal. Idle air control. vehicle speed, initial position, some more IC stuff. Okay, speedometer scaler. So this is a very important one. So all the speedometer stuff does have to be changed, which, like I said, I've already done for this. But all of these have to be updated so that your speedometer works. Speedometer scan tool stuff. Force motor current, that is auto trans type items. So again, don't need any of that. So I'm not adjusting it because it's not going to be looking for it. But this is basically what the voltage is versus trans temperature. And it's a huge, huge table with a bunch of different bits in it. Okay, so we got, again, more auto parameters. Park reverse neutral, kick down, hot kick down. All this stuff does not matter for the manual trans, so we can scroll past it. Manual mode upshift, cruise mode, performance up down. It's going to be Pontiac, Firebird, Trans Am stuff only. Mode selector, line pressures for the transmission, auto trans stuff. Again, there's a lot more auto trans type tuning activities in these calibrations than what's needed for the manual. So a lot of it's just turning things off. So it's relatively simple to do these. Again, these are, when I talk that there's almost 2,200 bytes. Each one of these line items is a byte. So I just kind of scroll through, and these ones that are repeats are big tables, so it's different throttle position. So here's downshift, torque converter again. So when you're tuning an auto car, there's a lot of stuff you got to go through. The transmission that I took out of there was a performance transmission with a high stall converter. A lot of these have to go through and be set. Cruise, shift times. Okay, so spark advance. So this is interesting that your main spark advance is different between the auto and the manual. My spark advance are set up different for my tune though, so I'm not going to adjust them. If you don't have already a tune on the car and you want just factory engine settings, you can just copy these over, and I'll kind of show you how that's done. So here's the spark table for basically 4 to 4,000 RPM. And then there's a compare tool. So you can see up here I'm comparing the factory manual tune to my custom tune. So you can see my spark setting, spark advance are much higher across much of the areas. When you start talking 4,000 RPM, I'm about the same. But the lower settings, I'm much higher advanced. Some of the performance stuff that I have set in here. Like I said, I'm going to keep them the same. If you wanted to basically just copy them over here, you can do that. Basically just copying the table from here. Should be a copy function. Differences between them. But yeah, there is a way to go in and copy from compare. So you just would copy those directly over in that section if you wanted to. So in this difference tool, right, every one of those little boxes, there's a bunch of them, right? It's a table of call it 100 different parameters. If you copy all of them at once, it copies them all. Each one of these line items is a different box. So again, I'm going to skip past all of those. EGR spark advanced correction. I have EGR turned off, so I don't need to adjust any of that. Stall savers for your torque converter. Don't need to worry about any of that. Deacceleration fuel cutoff. So this is where when you're off throttle while still in gear, whether it be an auto or manual car, it cuts the fuel off. This is what gets you the engine braking. So for the auto car, I had this turned up pretty high so that as when you're off throttle, it quickly turned off the fuel, which caused heavy engine braking. I did that for some of the racing that I was doing with it in the autocross, which really helped slow the car down. For the manual car, there are some differences, but I'm going to leave it set aggressive because the way I had it set for the auto car is actually more aggressive than I did for the manual car. For most people, they're just going to want to copy those over. For speedometer scaler, this base divisor, these are important ones. You have to adjust these for the difference in them. I am going to pull open a file. Again, this is a file that's out there online to help with these. But this basically helps you show what you need to set it as. The different parameters for speedometer adjustments. So let me get this opened up. I apologize, I'm using an absolutely ancient computer. This is my tuning only computer. It's the only thing I use it for is tuning, so it has very limited things on it to try to keep it from having issues. Because anytime you're doing tuning, especially on these older cars, when you're flashing new calibrations on it, it's always risky that you can brick your ECM, which then you have to send it off like $100 to get it unbricked. Not a huge deal, but I try to have this computer as limited as possible. So this is the calculator that I was talking about. So there's a few things you got to fill out here. Tire revolutions per mile. So you need to know that for the given tire that you're running, which for mine is 813 revolutions per mile. My rear end ratio for the manual is 345. And then the sensor pulse, which again here is a key for what that is. The manual Y body, which is what I'm using for the ZF, is 2. And basically this spits out what your parameters need to be set at. So my scalar needs to be 1, which we will double check it and make sure I have that set. So scalar base is what this is talking about is 1. You can see my factory was a 2. Difference between auto and manual. The divisor, which it's funny in this calculator, it says multiplier, needs to be 1.4023, which I'm 0.4023. This says 1.4024, so I'm actually going to adjust this real quick. And then scan tool, this is so that when you're using a scan tool, the speedometer works as well. A few other things it does here. So I like to go ahead and adjust this to what it says it needs to be as well, which that's already done. I'm going to add another digit in here. So all the speedometer stuff should be set up now. Stopped vehicle VSS pulse delay is showing it's different. I already have that adjusted over for what the manual to auto is. And that's it. So in that short time, we just went through all of the bits that are different between the manual and the auto, and we updated those. So you can see there's only a handful that really needed to be adjusted to update that tune. So last thing I'm going to do is save the things I've changed here, and going to take a slight pause from showing this screen, and we'll get back more to a live video of doing the flash on the car itself, and then we will see if basically the speedometer will be the only thing we'll be able to tell the difference on immediately. And then I'm going to have to go out and do some driving and some data logging on the car to make sure all of the other parameters are working. The only thing that I'm slightly concerned with is some of the low speed idle stuff. So I don't want the car shutting off when I'm going to a stoplight. So because I adjusted the weights, basically I went from a torque converter to a flywheel and clutch. The weight on the engine itself is different. So with it not in gear, not spinning, that mass of the torque converter, it could potentially have some issues at low speed idle. However, I think because my weights are very comparable with the smaller torque converter that I had, I think it should be okay, but I might have to adjust some of those parameters. The other thing is the deacceleration fuel cutoff. A little concerned with my very aggressive settings that I had for the auto trans. It might be too much for the manual. So I got to make sure that there's no issues that I could potentially be harming the engine there with. Worst case scenario, if I see some like burst knock timing things, pull up that I can show you. So what I'm going to be looking at here is basically counts for what it picks up for knock. If I'm seeing a whole lot of knock retard while I'm driving that could potentially be affecting the engine, or I'm seeing it come in here and dump a bunch of fuel because it's seeing lean conditions, I'll want to adjust that what's called deacceleration fuel cutoff. So that's DFCO. Worst case, like I said, I'll just copy the manual settings, the factory manual settings directly over, but I would like to keep the aggressive settings that I have because it'll be better for tracking the car. But with that, we're basically done with writing the tune. So now all that's left is really going and flashing it and doing some simple tests, which I'll do with the wheels off the ground just in the garage. I'm gonna have to wait a couple months to really start doing some data logging on the street with the car because it's January in Michigan and there's about a foot of snow on the ground right now. So it's probably going to be late March, early April before I can really get the car out and start testing it and doing some good data logs with it. But we'll be right back with more of a GoPro video showing the flash of the new tune to the car. All right, let's write a calibration to this thing. So, show you what we're working with here first. So, start it up. I'm gonna go in like that's fourth gear. See, we're turning and there's 0 miles per hour. All right. We'll shut that off. What we're going to do is just key the vehicle on, but not start it. And then, so with the computer wise, I do like to have it in airplane mode just so nothing's popping up. First thing I do is I test the interface, which tells you to have it unplugged from the vehicle, which I do. So it's going to run through its things, just checking all the system to make sure basically the computer side is good. So it says completed. It says this interface should be safe to use. So perfect. So next we're going to load a bin file, and then we're going to load the file that we just edited. So it says loaded. Updates plus manual swap, which is what we got. So we're going to go ahead and take our USB to ALDL cable and plug it in to the OBD2 port and simply click write calibration. The fans just kicked on the car, which means it's working, and we got an error. And it's fixing itself, which is good. So basically it said, oh, we got to erase the old calibration. So it's going through that. Erase in progress, erase successful. Now it's writing the new EEPROM on the T side. So it's working through all of that. So the big thing with this, you want to make sure your computer is fully charged or plugged in. The vehicle has a good battery or is hooked up to a jump box. I probably should have mine hooked up to a jump box, but battery's showing, you know, what, 10 volts, 12 volts right now, so we should be all right. This takes, you know, 3, 4, 5 minutes or so to get through normally. So getting close down here to the bottom. So this is just the T side. If I remember right, it's got to go through 4 different sides. So if that's the case, I'll pause it and come back once it's fully completed. We'll see. It's almost done what it does. Yep, so now it's doing the E side. So I'll go ahead and pause it, and we'll come back when this is all finished loading up, and we'll do a test to see if the new tune has our speedometer working again. That's about all we're going to be able to check at this point with the car inside and off the ground, and that, and make sure we don't have any check engine lights. But we didn't have any before, which is surprising to me, but we'll see what it does. Okay, we're back. So had to do E side and T side, so about 5 minutes total, but came up, procedure complete, flash right procedure completed. So we'll hit OK. So we didn't get an error, which means we didn't brick our ECM, which is a good start. So what I'm going to do is cycle power. Then it should still be in 4th gear. I'll start it up. So our new tune worked as far as the speedometer goes, at least. The flash was successful. You might have, I don't know if you'll be able to tell in the video or not, but it was definitely idling a little higher and sounded a little different. It does take the car a few minutes in drive time, I guess, few miles to learn itself again, because it's basically deleting all of the fuel trim data out of the computer anytime you flash a new one. New cal onto it, so car definitely wasn't super happy and really rich when it first fired up here, but with driving it, it'll learn all those minor things and figure out how much fuel it has to correct for the O2 sensors that are in it and all that other stuff. It doesn't help that it's pretty cold out here today. I haven't had the heat on out in the garage. Let's see what it's showing. So the car's showing 38 degrees out, so fresh cal, started it up. Pretty cold. It's running through a lot of things it doesn't like, but that's going to end it off for today, and getting pretty close to finishing off this series. So like I said, I got to get underneath the car. I want to nut and bolt everything one more time, make sure everything's good and tight. I did get the center console piece back in over the shifter. Got to tighten up the boot and put my shift knob on, and then put my center console lid or glove box lid, whatever you want to call it, back on. And then put the seats in, which my seats are race seats with harnesses, so I'm going to do a little bit of work to the brackets before I put them back in too. Found one broken weld on the passenger seat that I'm going to adjust. And then other than that, it's pretty much ready to go and ready to drive and be tested. I'm sure there'll be a couple bugs that come up, maybe some things in the tune that I have to adjust as we go. But that's pretty much going to end it off for this series. Thanks for sticking around, and for you all that have watched through a lot of the videos, I appreciate it. If you got any questions, hit me up in the comments.